Welcome back to Off the Wire. Anthony and I are here. You'll notice that I'm in a little different place than normal. I'm actually stationed in a different county as we have this winter storm moving in, and we've talked a little bit about storms in the past, and really like an after action kind of thing, which is like, okay, we went through this, this is what we learned, but we didn't talk as much, or we haven't talked as much, and we thought it'd be kind of cool to talk a little bit about like preparing for a storm. At least we're going to focus more on known storms. But when you do know something is going to happen, it could be a lot of different things. Doesn't necessarily have to be weather related, but with an ice storm kind of heading both Anthony and I's direction, it was just kind of on our mind to talk about how to prepare. Not exactly maybe every single thing we do, but like the concept, the mindset of preparing for an upcoming storm. So Anthony, I mean, kick us off a little bit. When you're thinking about something that's coming, in this case, we'll just say it's a weather event. Like, what's the high level process you use up until when the event happens?
Yeah, not that anyone looks forward to a storm, but it is kind of nice to where, you can dot all your I's and cross off all your T's. So, like, we've got a little checklist. We call it our storm prep checklist that differs from the IRP, but it's just these little things that we can go out and double check, like check all the UPSs, whether it be the building UPS or charging stations or even the individual ones at the district offices, little things like that. We do a lot of we have a lot of automated notifications and monitoring, but we actually take the time to lay hands on eyes on a lot of stuff beforehand just to make sure everything's good. And there's also the DR equipment that we have. So we've got generators. We got 6 generators that IT was responsible for at radio tower sites, and we just got a lot of equipment set to keep us up and running for when these events happen, and it's always good to kinda lay eyes on that. And then there's the people thing. Are you doing essential personnel only? Are you doing all hands on deck? And shaking that out. It's nice to have that time up front to kinda plan, but it I think it gives you a false sense of security because you know something's coming, but you don't know how bad it's gonna be. Kinda like what we're dealing with coming up tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that is tough, but I think it is even when we're doing planning for the unknown. Like I think honestly, a lot of the planning we do, especially on the cyber side, is for the unknown. I mean, we have an idea of potential avenues or that attacks might come from, but the exact severity and exactly which system they hit is, at least we do not get to down to that level, and I have not seen others get to a level where it's an individual kind of IRP plan per system. But when you're to your point, like when you have something, you have a known, or at least maybe you don't completely know, but you have a good idea. It does really help. I like what you were saying about having a checklist. That's something that we have kind of those things, but I don't know that they're as well recorded as they need to be. But I was thinking, and you tell me what you think too. I think when we have like an existing plan or an IRP, it feels like we've kind of gone through that risk assessment. That like, okay, and now we're just like executing it, and that is good. But how do you do like that risk assessment for the particular event you're talking about? And is that an input for your checklist, or is that something you just kind of keep in mind as you're going through the checklist,
It's
or how does that work?
Yeah, and I say this, like, don't get me wrong, I think it's great to have a checklist, but they are not the be all. Like, well, 1, people can look at a checklist and they can interpret it different ways. And then once you're going through it, a lot of it is just deciding like when things are down, what do we want to focus on? What can wait, till we get to it? There are certain things that we need to ensure that don't fail. Like, so we do a lot of effort to make sure that they don't go down. And what risk are we willing to accept? I mean, because you can't protect everything to the 10th degree, and some stuff you're just willing to not give it all the redundancy. You're willing to accept it may go down, and you deal without it. We're both working on this is something that I think will help us, and I know we're both working on this, is the business continuity plan. So, like, the IRP kinda tells you how to get everything back up and running and a whole lot of other things, but with the business continuity plan, And I think we all have this idea, and, I'll steal your thunder again with the crown jewels. The business continuity plan, the beauty of it is it tells you what your crown jewels are and basically kind of a good order of operations to get things restored, and it kinda goes down into the different levels or tiers of what is the most important thing to focus on, but I think we all have that, but I think it's definitely good to have it in writing. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, obviously, we're kind of back and forth on this episode, and I think we were kind of thinking it would be better as more of a conversation.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Something that like got brought up to me, and I guess I knew it, but maybe it's kind of like a frog in a boiling pot of water, right? As long as the temperature's like turned up slowly, and they're not aware. But I was having a conversation with our CEO, and we were just kind of going back and forth, and she was talking about just I don't know, she had a thought the other day, and she was saying, like, it was amazing to her how reliant on technology we were for, like, out in the field operations, not necessarily, like, in the office, but even out in the field, being able to, in our case, restore lines, but and if your local government could be getting civilization back in order or whatever. Talk a little bit about does that stress you? Does that have you noticed, I guess, that increase, and has anything changed about your preparations due to that? And also, like, does it make you more worried?
It doesn't because we are so storm focused at our organization that I don't really I mean, don't get me wrong, like, we worry about it, and I think the further we go along, the more reliant our field folks are on technology, but I guess my mindset goes to if we get hit with a Cat 4 or Cat 5, like, those guys gotta they know what to do. They focus on the transmission and then just work their way down like, would they be as fast? No, but they've got their routines buried in their head, like, they could be sufficient without us, but it we definitely do speed up the process and enhance communications. But I think it's either it's twofold. We're spoiled because we focus on it so much, but the flip side is because we get hit with so many hurricanes over the years that we have to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, at least for me, it does I mean, I think it does stress me a little bit more. I think especially coming in my early days, my early career days, it was like when things were down, it wasn't ideal, but, you know, you didn't feel the weight of maybe the community on your shoulders a little bit, you know, and I know the linemen do feel that, and obviously it's not the same level in any way. If they're putting up power, that's a whole different level, but, you know, I mean, the mapping, the ability to tell where outages are and where they're not, the ability to report that, it is becoming such a critical thing, and it's not even just to us, like, we know when we hit I mean, when we had the Hurricane Helene hit, we had reporters and news stations and stuff following our outage map and our Facebook post, and that was, like, how that was their feed to share on, like, the news that night, and yeah, could they do it without it? Sure, but, I mean, it still makes you think a little bit, and I think it does give added pressure. Something that I mean, specifically went into this storm and any future storm that's weather related for us is just the importance of the internet. Now, obviously, we're still in the electric utility business. There's still a lot of on-premise stuff. Ultimately, the internet plays now a big role in what we do. And you know, we were out there testing Starlink. We were out there testing our other connections and stuff like that. And this week, in fact, like I said, I'm stationed a little farther from our main office to and have a Starlink with me to potentially drop off at an office if we have to get somebody up, if we have a tree crashing into fiber or something like that. But tell me, like, have you noticed that as well? I guess as far as the internet and like, where in your level of system importance is the internet? Is it a crown jewel?
It is tip top,
Yeah.
and that's something like I'm not saying it can't happen. I better knock on wood, but technically we've got 4 circuits. I mean, we've got 3 with PGP to fail over, and part of it's a benefit where we do serve fiber services, and we don't do it to the home, but we do it for emergency services, schools. So the internet staying up is not only important to us, it's important to the community.
Mhm.
So, I'm not saying that we couldn't have it where all 3 of those circuits could go down, and matter of fact, we in the budget this year, we've got it in the budget to do a Starlink device to maybe get up some basic services just in case, but, if we were to lose all feeds, now that would be some major pressure.
Yeah.
And on
Oh, yeah,
top of
yeah.
that, the phones. I mean, we do some planning for that. We've got a third party call center, CRC, that could take calls, but all they would be doing is saying, "Hey,
We can't do anything.
can't do anything," but
Yeah.
at least they would have a human voice if all of our circuits did go down. But, yeah, it's definitely the number one thing that we wanna keep going is the internet connection.
Yeah, and I never thought of it as that critical. I mean, I knew it was important. I didn't think of it as critical, and now I think I've changed that. I mean, I think I'll put it in that crown jewel pile of, with the 4 or 5 or 6 other things that we'd have in there.
Mm,
It we got really close on a storm to losing internet, and, I mean, at least for us, I'm not sure for the average employee, for us, we were sweating it pretty hard. I mean, we had a Starlink as a backup, but still, we were gonna go it would be fairly degraded, let's say, if we had to go to that. You kind of alluded to people, and this is something that, like, I think it depends on the known event. If it's a storm, of course, like, for us, the storm that's impending is a potential ice storm. We've went through a hurricane, and you've went through a bunch of hurricanes, and we've went through other ice storms, but talk about, like talk about the risk of people, and how do you prep or that resource to mitigate that risk? I mean, if you're getting ready to head into an event.
yeah. I I'll start off with this. It is for these type of events, it is important to have really good people.
Mhm.
So, something that I don't know, I shouldn't be shocked or surprised, but talking with all the folks in our department, I was like, "Who's ready to come in Sunday at 6 in the morning?" And I called out a few people saying, like, "I gotta have you," and then some, like I was like, "You don't have to if you don't want to." And I got every single person coming in, like, that's the type of people I work with. I'm just fortunate for that, and I think it's very important. And don't get me wrong, like, I do think in the face of adversity, people will step up. I mean, you really kinda see what someone's made of during a event like this because it really tests you. And but anyways, I getting past the just that is great that everyone's showing up, but there's a lot to take in mind, and I'm sure I won't cover everything, but if you're doing a long duration event like you guys dealt with Helene, like, you actually like, it sounds great to have all hands on deck, but if you're wearing everybody out at the same time, working them like a dog, like, that's gonna put you in a bind, you know? So you really sometimes you gotta force people to like, you need to sit back and take time off. I think another big focus though is really just and each person this is individual, but, you know, making sure that they have time to get things at home in check. Like, so they're not worried about their family, their wife, their pets, their kids. I didn't say that in the right order, but, you get the point. Like, there would be nothing worse than an employee that's really mentally not there because they're so stressed worrying about their family and their safety and stuff like that. So I think and this it depends on the situation, but, like, with a hurricane, we know it's coming, and we give time, like, we'll give them time to go get their affairs in order because
Mhm.
that's how can you focus if you're worried about your family? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've always heard, especially, I think with folks that maybe living out on the street, I've heard someone say is like, you have to take care of immediate needs before you can take care of, like, longer term stuff. So, to your point, like, they have to if you can't you gotta give them time to get in the right mindset for whatever is coming. If you know the storm, whatever storm it is, and you were talking about giving people shifts and making people go home, I think that could easily happen in a big cyber event too,
Mm,
because you're gonna be I mean, anybody that thinks a cyber event's gonna be a day or 2 has not been through a large one, and so making sure people go home, of course, but when you have a known storm, if it's something, let's say, that might endanger that person's family, Could be a hurricane, could be ice storm, could just be it could be civilization chaos. I mean, who knows? Whatever it ends up being, we're in an industry where we're kind of critical. So you need to make sure that they've got all that stuff in order and be really flexible and make sure that you're giving them as much as you can before the storm, especially. I remember when we had the hurricane, we allowed people to bring their kids in because they didn't have power at their house if they were going to work. And what am I going to do? Like, you come to work and you leave your family in especially if you got younger ones. But yeah, as much as you can, kind of be really flexible, especially in the days leading up to it.
Yeah, and I guess just to add on to it, like, I wish I could think like this all the time, but I'd probably do it 10 times more during a major event, making sure they're okay, or even
Mm,
giving them a cup of coffee or something like that, just kinda catering to their needs. I mean, because when there's a major event as a vice president, it's really just make sure the people are able to do their job, like remove roadblocks, and stuff
mhm.
like that. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, like we got to make key decisions, as a leader, but it's really the main thing is just make sure that your people get stuff out of their way so they can get the job done is the big thing.
Yeah, Anthony, there was something that I may have even said it on the podcast before. So if someone's a longtime listener, they might be like, "Oh yeah, he's telling that story again." But I remember when I first was blessed to be promoted into a position where I had folks on a team, and I was kind of asked to look after them. A guy came and talked to me who had been there a long time manager, and he said, "Remember that people will do what's expected of them, and that you have to you have to tell them." So I think that's kind of one of those preps too that we maybe forget about. I mean, again, you're letting people get kind of their lives in order so that they could be focused, but you also kind of have to tell them what your expectation is. And we had a meeting earlier this week, and I said, "This is the equivalent of our Super Bowl, right? When we have a major storm come in, there's potential for mass outages. This is our Super Bowl. I mean, this is when we're asked to perform and to perform the highest of our abilities. This isn't the preseason, and it isn't the regular season. It's win or go home." And so I think making sure that people are aware of that, so that I mean they can rise to that. I think you're right. Whenever there is something that happens, one, it brings everybody together, but two, I think people do rise to the occasion, and you just outlining where it needs to go, and people will do it. I mean, you don't have to like keep reminding anybody, but in the past, especially maybe not in crisis, but in non-crisis times, I have not always been as clear about expectation. I just assume people knew, but you can't really assume people know.
Yeah. I've seen one thing that it makes me think of is a silly analogy, but when I was in the Marines, when I was like a young Lance Corporal E3, just a worker bee, I remember just loading equipment in the back of Humvees, okay? And we'd always have like a sergeant in the back saying, "Hey, put this over there, move that over there." And you're like, man, they're like packing geniuses. But you got three bodies like all in the back of the Humvee, like moving things, but they are standing back, watching everything and giving direction. And my turn came as a sergeant. I found out it's very important for someone to be sitting back, look at the big picture. As loading a Humvee is a simple example, but you're going to have the same
Mhm.
concept. And just like you said, like given expectations, like during a major event, people are so focused and into things like their minds are just and that they're worn out. Like someone has to be in the back, like making sure that the necessary things are getting done in the kind of like order of operations. So yeah, I think setting expectations is really much more important in a time of crisis.
So changing gears just a little bit, Anthony, it was something I was thinking about this week is things that have to be adjusted based on the storm, especially maybe it's not a weather storm for your organization, maybe, or for a listener's organization. Maybe it's just a huge issue. Your primary internet provider's out, or you have a major issue with like a cloud system or something. Obviously, this would be like if we needed to kind of a thing, but um, talk a little bit about flexible to adjusting your normal environment, even from a cybersecurity standpoint. are you willing to do that? And like, how much will you allow change to happen in a crisis, especially when it comes to cybersecurity?
So, I mean, I think it's more important to be flexible during these times than any. And this probably isn't the route that you would take it, but I'm just going to mention it. So, there's things where, you've got to look at the greater good for the organization during these important events, and whether it's cybersecurity or whatever. But like there's things where I've got a guy, and I'm sure you guys do this, but like he'll step aside and fly the drone for the organization during a major, if it's a weathering event, like that's pretty important. There's also, we've got folks that might be making sandwiches and stuff like that. It's kind of, you got to look at what the greater good is for the organization. And there's come times where
Yeah.
I can't think of an example, but there's things where we had locked down that maybe we kind of opened up. Now, I don't think that's a good practice in general to lax your cybersecurity during an event, but there may be times where you got to take it back a step just to help people out.
Can I give you an example, Anthony, and you tell me what you think on this one?
Yeah.
Just to kind of like, I had a cyber example that I just thought of. Okay, let's say you got an event. We'll just use the weather event. I think it makes the most sense for this. That you've got 100 folks coming into your environment. Maybe they're gonna need access to your maps or something like that. But let's say normally it's a two-factor authentication into your mapping system.
uh,
Would you turn that off in a crisis?
yeah, we definitely would.
Yeah, and I think I had a I had an incident happen, or incident's not the right word. Had a discussion this week with other fellow senior staff. And I knew it already, but it really put in perspective, I think, IT's role with incidents, with things that are coming, these crisis events, but also in just normal times, and that it's real easy to forget that what we are really there to do as IT folks is to basically take a look at and determine what is risky behavior and what is not risky behavior. And for the things that we believe are risky or are risky, just objectively risky, we're to provide a plan to either mitigate that risk. Ideally, we mitigate it with no change or no impact. But if that's not possible, we provide a plan to mitigate that risk and then we determine what will be the impact of mitigating this risk and what, if we don't mitigate this risk, what are the potential downsides?
Yeah.
And we present it. And I had one of these. I had something, you know, crop up, and I presented it as like, here's a risk. It's not a large risk, but there is a risk there. Here's the potential downsides. Here's what we'd like to do. Here's what would happen if we did nothing. And that discussion was had, and the business decided that it was willing to accept that risk. I think a lot of folks listening might have the tendency to grumble and hold a grudge about that kind of thing. But I think we have to understand that the business is full of accepted risk, whether that's an IT thing or an operational thing or a people thing. There are various accepted risks, and it's impossible to mitigate all risk, and it's also unpleasant to run a business mitigating every single risk. It becomes so tedious and tiresome that it impacts what you're able to do. So, any thoughts on that? And is that how you kind of view your role? Or anything to add there? Or I don't know. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't. And actually, reflecting back, I remember a time where for any of our like third party vendors, like they've got to go through our third party software and it has to get approved by someone in our department. Well, when we were during a major event and we needed all the help we could get, like we just basically allowed them to VPN into our network and stay connected with the clear expectations that this is going back to normal when things get settled. But
Mhm.
yeah, you've got to be flexible. And anyways, and I would definitely be a little reluctant to lift cybersecurity just because some entities will actually target you
Mhm.
while you're vulnerable. But like you mentioned, like with the map data, what is it going to hurt if your map data gets out there? That's not the end of the world. And if you got a vendor that you've been working with for 20 years, is it really that big of a risk to let them on your network for a week.
Yeah.
Now, you've gotta be flexible, just and I know some people, like, are habitual rule followers, and
Yeah.
that's great in some situations, but in some situations, you gotta just look at what's best for the business, and I'll mention the one thing with the CIA triad, availability is in there, so,
Mhm.
availability, like, you gotta make sure that's one of your priorities too when it comes to security.
So, Anthony, as we kinda wrap up, um, for those that are listening, we did a really good episode after the Hurricane Helene thing and it was about lessons learned, and we talked a little bit about kind of the things to do after a storm a little bit. I mean, obviously the individual lessons we learned from that, but also like kind of how to handle it after storm. And in this episode, we're kind of talking about before the storm, but I thought kind of to finish this up and put a bow on it, you could talk a little bit about anything that you would like to remind people to do while the crisis is actually happening.
Yeah, one thing is slow down and don't overreact. People are gonna be looking to you, and this doesn't matter what it doesn't matter if you're a VP or if you're a network admin or a help desk tech. Like, there's gonna be people looking to you, and I kind of feel like panic is contagious to some degree. So take things slow and calm, and honestly, that will make things actually go faster if you're being careful, slow and calm, especially when you're going without sleep and everyone's got bad attitudes. If you're doing a 10-day event, everyone's gonna be in a pretty bad mood on day
Yeah.
10. Like,
Yeah.
it is what it is. Everyone's lack of sleep and all that. So I would say stress, like, slow is fast.
Hmm.
There's a phrase out there. And another thing is, and I actually kind of picked this up, this gentleman, I'll call him out, Ron Jaffe, with Sienna Tech. And this is, I mean, we were talking about an application, but it really goes on to everything. We're like, well, if we're having a major event, what do we need to do to this application? Do we need to restart it? Do we need to turn things off or on? And he's like, no. He's like, you want things to work during a major event the same way they work every single day. And I think that goes for everything. If it, don't get me wrong, like, things are going to change, but if you've got to do all these special changes during a major event, like, those aren't your normal. It's not routine, so you might miss things.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to make sure that put systems in place to where you don't have to make a bunch of changes during a major event. I know it's being very generic, but I think it's good to just try to operate like you do day to day, if at all possible. And that you can't just do that. Obviously, you got to do the work to do it. And that's what, if you've got applications or stuff that's like buggy, like when it gets heavily taxed or something like that, you need to work at replacing that. Or
Hmm.
probably not the best example, but you kind of want your day to day operations to work during major events for a lot of things. And what do you have, Tanner, for that?
I mean, the only thing, there's a couple things I might add. I'd say the first is we talked about the after action, like I said earlier in the other episode, but and I don't remember if we mentioned this, but writing things down in the moment, you definitely want an after action to talk about like the big picture. But if something didn't work or you had some sort of issue or someone asked you for something that they wouldn't have normally asked you for, write it down right then so you don't have to remember it later. And I do agree with some of your earlier comments about not making too many changes. I would say the other thing I would say is not only writing down kind of weird requests or things you shouldn't do next time or something like that, but you talked about having to make some changes, like write down every change you make.
Yeah.
Because like it's very easy to forget that you changed something and then you didn't, and then go back and then be like, "What was that we changed?" And then like it takes you 3 months to figure out that you disabled MFA on that application, and someone got in because it wasn't MFA. So
Yeah.
just I would say you don't have to make a huge taxing ordeal about it, but have an expedient change management documentation process.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a great idea.
All right, Anthony. So I guess we're pre who knows what ice storm in 2026. Hopefully, for those of our listeners that are in North Carolina, hopefully this will, I'll say it'll be better than we're expecting. and for various ones across the country. I know this is one of I saw today. This is one of the largest winter storms several forecasters have ever seen. So, just thoughts and prayers go out to all listeners who might be impacted by this, and try to do some of those things. If you do get to listen to this before that impact, try to do some of the things we're talking about as you're working through that crisis. And if you are already in the thick of it, maybe use that after action to talk about what you can do next time, and kind of come up with a checklist, like Anthony was saying, or a process, I think, even better, to evaluate the risk for known events. Anthony, anything else you want to add before we close it up?
Just think about the linemen. If they do something that aggravates you in the normal day to day, just think about what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
Get them a
Yeah.
little slack.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? That's probably, I think that's the best last tip, is cut everybody a little slack.
Yeah.
Everybody, to your point, I think you mentioned earlier, people are stressed. And yeah, I think when we're stressed, we like to have a little slack. So golden rule it, pay it forward, and let others have that. Someone's going to be not cutting them slack. So let it be someone else, not you.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, this is another episode of Off the Wire. We thank everyone for listening.
Thank you, everyone.